Welcome back, everyone, to the Founders Only podcast. I am so excited to welcome my dear friend, Tessa Thomas from Pipeline Solutions here today. Welcome, Tessa.
Thanks, Bia. Happy to be here.
Yes. So Tessa Thomas is the co-founder of Pipeline Solutions, a studio intelligence platform that provides performance analytics and automation for boutique fitness studios. With a lifelong passion for sports and fitness, Tessa is also a former NCAA Division I softball athlete and Winthrop University Athletics Hall of Fame inductee. Beyond tech and fitness, she holds a master's in art conservation and has lived and worked in cities like London, New York, Sydney, and Toronto. So, again, welcome.
Thanks,
And
Bia.
so we are going to jump right in. And can you tell me about your journey to becoming the founder of Pipeline Solutions, the co-founder of Pipeline Solutions?
Yeah, of course. I think like most journeys, it's not quite linear.
Mhm.
Things kind of happen as they do, but effectively I was, as you mentioned, an athlete. I've been an athlete forever. When I kind of ended my softball career after competing through college, I knew that athletics and sport were still going to be a part of my life in some way, but I didn't actually know kind of how or what that would look like. We could say that for a whole other conversation of athletes, transitioning out of a competitive sport, things like that. It can be really tricky. And so what I did was I got my personal training certification because I figured, well, if I'm not going to be competing, doing group fitness or training people, that could be something that is interesting to do part time. I was going through my master's in art conservation. That was going to be my main kind of thing, but sport and athletics were always part of my life, so I figured I could do that part time, and so I did. And I coached and trained, and I ended up in an F45 here in Toronto. And from the first day I walked in there, I thought, this is different. I like this. This is kind of what I've been missing. It felt like the motto is team training, life changing, and that team environment I felt again for the first time in a really long time. And it wasn't just the training and the members; it was the team, the staff. Liz and John Ledbrook co-owned the studio, and we had a great studio team. And effectively, I just had started working as a coach in the studio. And, about 6 months in, maybe a year in, I had already been dabbling in some software projects just out of my own interest, on the side, and just kind of got into wanting to build something, maybe build an app, kind of do those things. It was kind of the very early days of no code and low code tech. So we're talking like 2014, somewhere around there. So, kind of just trying to figure out how could I build something. I'm not technical, but things were coming out that kind of enabled, people such as myself to actually build some things. So, just in conversation with John, we were talking, and I could see that the studio is actually doing really well. It was growing a lot, but with that came other challenges. It's just different from opening. So when I started, the studio's in its first year. It was doing really great, but it was also a very early time in the brand. Like it was only the second F45 in Canada. So, it was just a very different time. And with that growth came new challenges. And it was just through a conversation of, maybe there's something we could build. Maybe there's something that could help you run the studio. And that was essentially kind of where Pipeline Solutions came from, was can we build something that you need in this studio? Because if you need it, then I'm guessing other owners might need it too. And we just started working and kind of building things from there.
So I did not know about your interest in coding already. I did not realize that. So how did that happen? Like tell me what you saw or heard or
Right.
experienced that you even thought to go, because it is quite a switch.
Yeah.
It's like, Batman having like a model car building hobby on
Right.
like really like
Yeah, it's pretty divergent. No, I totally get it. And I think it's just because I think it's a I think it relates to, it's funny you say model cars because I've always been a tinker and builder in kind of that way. So, for example, even art conservation is what I went to school for, and what the main part of my career was for some time, is literally preserving and restoring artworks, like super detailed, physically working on them, all those types of like hands-on doing the research, understanding what's going on, problem solving, all of that. So I think realistically, the skills were kind of pretty transferable in the sense of just wanting to kind of get into the nitty gritty of something. But of course, the timing, right? So you have just apps kind of exploding. You have the iPhone and, 2008 and the App Store and all those types of things happening. So I think timing wise, it was just really interesting of a time where you're hearing about people building things, right? People building apps. And I think this is going to sound really weird, right? But at the time, there's no distinction in my brain between like an app and like a B2B SaaS platform like that.
Right.
Yeah. Where we are now is definitely not, where I started with when I started building things with no code and low code. It was more so. So for example, the first thing I worked on was an app that did like books. So it was like a book summary app for trainers, for coaches and people in fitness, called Fit Notes. So it just took, books from everything from like nutrition, strength training, all sorts of topics that would be relevant to trainers and coaches, and dialed them down into, really digestible book summaries. People get their information on the go. So really simple, nothing crazy. But it was just the idea of like, maybe I could build something that would be really interesting and helpful, useful. So I don't know. I think that part of me has kind of been around for a really long time. I can't really put a pin on where it all started, but I think in my mind it makes sense. And so that's kind of where the journey began. So
well, I think we're going to explore that in the next part, in the next segment, actually, like going back in time to maybe see where, how you evolved as a person and your interests and skill development.
Sure.
But I'm curious, before we go down that lane, when you all built the first like MVP, so you all were you built this intentionally and exclusively for this specific studio, and you were not really motivated, so to speak, at the time to build something for others. It kind of just made sense. Is that right? Or
yeah, pretty much.
Was more of it a little bit like, hey, this could be profitable, another business outside of this business? Was that how you approached it?
Yeah, I think there was definitely the idea that, look, this could be a business in and of itself if it makes sense, But for me, I always look at things as, can we help can we solve one problem? And if we can do that, then that's awesome. Like I love to do that. And if we can do that at scale, then this can become its own thing. And so for me, because I was already coaching, I was working in conservation at the time, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, this can become my full-time thing. That wasn't necessarily the intention at that moment. But the idea was, well, if we can build something for our studio, maybe there could be a business here, maybe it could be a side thing. Who knows what the scale of this is. But sure enough, the brand, F45 was growing at the time. Obviously it's still growing, but was in like really a big growth phase at that time. And so even if it was just for, this brand, maybe it makes sense. Maybe we go to other brands. Really, it was pretty up in the air at that point in time. I think for me, really, it was about, I tried building something before, like Fit Notes, and there was a couple other things, and it was kind of just like, I just really want to make something that is useful and helpful and that people use and they need and they like to work with, and it's user friendly. So that was really kind of the main driver of it. And then if there was an opportunity to grow and scale it, then that would be there. But really solving kind of this desire, John really, he's like, I'm looking for a dashboard. There's so many things that we pull all the time, the reporting and all that kind of stuff. If we could just not have to do that, then that would be great. And that was really the start of it and trying to build that out.
Okay, so you all built a working, really a prototype, like version 1, beyond an MVP for this studio. And at that stage, was that a low code, no code solution?
It was, yes,
so
it was.
The technical co-founder.
Yeah, if you want to call it that.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I mean,
more
technical than John. Yeah, so it's not the scale is this. Yeah, the spectrum is very wide, and we were still in the very narrow sliver of it, which is like pretty non-technical. But with that being said, I would say what that work did allow for was, now that we do have, so we have a partner, Mike, our technical lead CTO now. I can communicate with him, I think, on a level that is totally different than had I not, even built just the low code, or no code type versions of things, and having interacted with the data so much to try and get a V1 off the ground. Without all of that, I think it would be a lot more difficult now to, communicate on the product as it is. But yeah, it was a no code, low code versions. We've gone through every kind of type of front end, I think, that you can imagine. So everything from spreadsheets to I guess it's Looker now, which would have been
Data Studio.
Yeah, Data Studio. Yeah. So it was Data Studio before. What else did we try? We had a Tableau front end for a bit. We had Gecko board, like so many things I was trying out just to see what would make sense for what we wanted to do. And realistically, in the end, of course, having our own front end was where it was going to go, but we just weren't there yet, which is totally fine. And I think everything, comes in time when it's ready for that. But essentially, yeah, we were using no code, low code tools. The benefit of that now, though, is, sometimes we are approaching studios or operators that are trying to do that same thing using those same tools, right? And so I can speak to that and say, look, I know what you're trying to do, and it's just really difficult. So, I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth your time, worth the cost, all that, when we could just do it for you, because I've literally done all the things you're trying to do right now. And it's a lot. So there's definitely a lot of learning that came out of that time. And what's so crazy is, we got that up and running. It was working for our studio. We had 2 other studios that we were pitching on it just locally, presented to them. They were keen. They were like, let's get up and started. And that was March 11th, 2020. So literally the world shut down 2 days later, and we didn't touch it for 6 months because nobody was open. It's software, but it's reliant on physical businesses and people being in those studios. So, it was a really kind of
tough time.
Yeah, tough time to try and get something off the ground. But we kind of pushed through is the very quick version of what went on during that time. But it's been a journey for sure.
I have one more question, and then we're gonna pivot the conversation. So for these first 2 external customers of using the app, very high level, how did you approach them to start that sales conversation? What was the context, or how did you approach it from a, hey, we just built this tool that's working really well for us. Would you be interested to learn more? Was it that simple?
Pretty much, yeah. Okay. It was pretty simple because we're networked here. They were local, so other owners that John has in his network, just kind of essentially presenting what we had built for the studio and how it was looking. And also, it was so early that we could just ask for feedback too, which is also a great approach. This is what we're doing. What do you think? What would you add? What would you like to see here? So those were kind of the early conversations that we were having with prospective kind of studios at the time.
Okay. So now let's rewind the clock. So who was Tessa before entrepreneurship? Let's go back. Let's go back pre-18. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? How did you spend your time?
Oh
What are
boy.
some pivotal moments? Have you always had an entrepreneurial spirit?
Oh boy, oh boy. Here we go. Who was Tessa? I was a athlete. I guess you would, if there was kind of a cast of characters of a high school TV show, I would have been kind of the scholar athlete. So good grades, doing the whole school thing, but also in high school, I played 5 different sports.
Oh my
So
God.
I was
You had no
doing,
time for
no,
anything.
I was very, very, very busy.
Yeah.
And that was 5 sports in school and then 2 outside of school, like rep teams, competing at
My
a higher
goodness.
level in a couple other sports. So, yeah, so athletics was like a very, very, very large part of my life for a very long time, pretty much right until I started grad school. And then there was this like vacuum of,
Yep.
of all of the things that I had been working towards for so long,
Yeah.
where it just changed. And I wouldn't say that I wasn't ready for it. I think
Mhm.
realistically, I had been burnt out. It was a lot for a long time. So I think I was ready for a break and looking to do something new and different. So it was okay. But at the same time, it's tricky. It's tricky to navigate where to place that energy and focus, because elite sport is kind of just that. It's like your ability to dig into something, deliberate practice, like just essentially turn yourself over to this process, is a skill, and it's a skill that I'd been building for so long, and then kind of needed somewhere to put it. So I think that's really where entrepreneurship came into the picture. I wouldn't say that I was an entrepreneurial kid. I wasn't like doing the baseball card thing or lemonade stand, all that kind of stuff. I would say that even from a very, very young age, because of the nature of sport in my life, I didn't do a lot of the regular schedule programming, if that makes sense. So even from, I think, as early as second grade, like I was missing class to go to
Mm,
tournaments and stuff like that.
mm,
So the idea of like a day to
mm.
day, like every day, 9 to 5, like that type of static schedule was not going to be for me. I pretty much recognized that right away because I just never had that, even with school, because of the nature of what I was doing. It just was never kind of that kind of cadence. So, I think entrepreneurship lends to that, of course. The hours can be, don't get me wrong, they can be super long,
Mhm.
but you've created your
There's
own.
flexibility and adaptability.
Yeah, there's flexibility, adaptability, and it's a system that you have to understand that you've created. So whether you abide by it or change it, it's up to you. But essentially, yeah, that was kind of what I was really focused on as a kid. I have an older brother. He's awesome. He's the best big brother I could have asked for. It's my first coach. Everything I did when I was a kid, I wanted to just do what my big brother was doing. So he played baseball. So I ended up playing baseball with the boys, doing that whole thing, and then switched over to softball and ended up at Winthrop University in South Carolina, playing D1 softball for 4 years. Played in the national team program here in Canada for a little bit as well. So that was really the main focus. And, I would say probably the only kernel of entrepreneurship that was around. My dad was an entrepreneur, but, he wasn't in the picture all the time. So it's obviously parental relationships can be complex. So we'll get into all of that. But, there was a model there when I was a kid, for sure. And then the opposite of that, my mom worked in government for like 40 years, just super stable, super steady. doing the thing. So kind of two ends of the spectrum that I grew up with.
How did you end up even thinking about art conservation as, again, quite a different life
Yeah.
from this rigorous sports career that you had as a young person? So
Yeah.
what even made you go down that lane? And how did you
Yeah.
even know that was a possibility?
Yeah.
Does not even know
Yeah.
that is a actual path for their career, which is super unique and cool. But yeah, how did you pick that?
Absolutely. So that's where my mom comes in. So my mom worked in government here in Ontario in Canada. And one of her positions, well, where she was for the longest time was at the Archives of Ontario.
Mm.
So the provincial archives, which, you know, if anybody is listening, there would be a provincial, there's local, so there'd be municipal and then provincial or state and then national archives pretty well everywhere. There you probably have walked by them in your city without even knowing it. You know, that's the type of thing that we're talking about. So the Archives of Ontario had Take Your Kids to Work Day. It's actually a program, just it's not the Archives of Ontario, it's everybody across the province, one day a year. When you're in grade 9, Take Your Kids to Work Day, so parents bring their kids to work. And so I had already been in the building, to be honest. My mom worked there for so long that, you know, there's certain times where I tagged along and had been there. But it was interesting because the only place that I found interesting in that building was the lab, the preservation lab. So you could imagine a building that's full of boxes and documents and everything's just being stored, really. Don't get me wrong. Climate control, all that is super important. And it's really needed and necessary. But then there's this one little room that's like looks like a scientific lab, and you're thinking, what happens in there? So that really piqued my interest. And then with Take Your Kids to Work Day, I think it was the first time I actually got to do like a full tour of the lab and meet the conservators and kind of do all that. So that's what really piqued my interest. And that's kind of how I ended up pursuing art conservation, was really the introduction through my mom and through the Archives of Ontario, and then pursuing art history and chemistry in my undergrad, and then a Master of Art Conservation in graduate school.
So one thing I was thinking of asking you about, you know, given your background and what I knew about your background was like, what does a regular day look like? And you and I have had this kind of conversation around the health, the wellness. And so given your, you know, extensive fitness, I guess you could call it, journey, you know, before you started, before you actually were a fitness coach. It's just really it's such a part of your regimen. Like, what does your day look like now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's to your point, you know, fitness is such a big part of my life. Like our software integrates with fitness studios. So there's that side of it. There's the business side. But, you know, day to day, I essentially, if I don't get a workout in, I definitely feel not at my best. So most days start with taking out my dog, who's to our right here. You can't see him, but he's very soundly asleep. He's very active, so he's got to go out in the morning. So take him out, go do a workout, and then essentially it's just blocks of working on pipeline mainly. So after that morning workout, about a 2-3 hour block, break for lunch, same thing in the afternoon. And then right now, because we're, you know, really quite busy, and that's a good thing, and try to do all the things, some of the evenings as well have an evening block. But if that's not happening, then you'll typically find me watching some sort of sporting event. We were very spoiled this year with the Olympics. So there was about a 2-3 week stretch where I had a motto, which was Olympics on all the time. So even if I was working on something, I just have like a little screen of track and field happening off to the left. So yeah, it's just a lot of, you know, it's not super glamorous, but literally working out, eating right, hanging out with family, with my partner, with my dog, and just working on pipeline.
What time do you generally get up and what time do you go to bed generally? Oh, during the week.
During the week, up at about 7 most days. But I am a night owl, so if I do need to push through and do work in the evenings or anything like that, then it could be anywhere midnight, 1 a.m. But try not to. Usually in bed by 11.
Yes, I'm also a night owl. I struggle very much with trying to change my, like, I just am in my best element in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I when I was younger, when I was in my 20s and running this business, I was middle of the night, like 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning on a regular. I would through the night.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
then wake up at like 11. And that
Right.
is not productive for
No.
at all.
No.
I had to
You just,
switch that.
yeah, you're just waking up to a lot of inbound if you're getting up at 11.
Exactly.
But yeah,
Everybody's like, oh, child, the day is done.
right.
It's over.
I love that.
Can't do anything in the middle of the night but work. But it's quiet.
It's quiet. Yeah.
Especially when you have kids or what have you.
Yeah.
Like, they're asleep. Everybody's asleep. You can just focus and do whatever you want.
For sure.
The phone doesn't ring. It's,
Yep.
love it, you know?
It is. It's nice.
And okay, so what is Tessa's superpower?
Ooh, what is Tessa's superpower? I think I spoke to a little bit, but I can get pretty detailed and be able to kind of stay in that space for a long time, which, you know, that comes from sport. That just comes from doing the thing repeatedly. I would say that that's probably my superpower. Trusting the process and just kind of that deliberate practice. It comes with, I think, patience, which can be difficult sometimes for sure. Absolutely. But I think those two things are probably my superpower, because entrepreneurship is, you know, it just is going to come with its challenges. Absolutely. Like, you're not, there's no world where that's not going to happen. So I think being able to, you know, stay patient with things, and trust in doing the work is probably where my superpower is. And that really, I think, was developed through softball. You know, with sport, what's interesting is what you see on the field is really the 10%, right? Like, there's so many more hours. Yeah. The amount of hours you're spending practicing, traveling, doing all those things, like, far, far outweigh the time you get to actually compete. So I think having done that for such a long time, you know, I think it is a space where in the end I'm probably more comfortable in, which doesn't necessarily mean it's a great thing, but I'm not surprised that that is kind of where I found success in entrepreneurship, is, you know, essentially just staying the course, doing the work, and being patient with things.
That is such a great analogy. I have actually many occasions talked to my team about how performance management and leadership is very much like coaching a team sport.
Oh, absolutely.
And I've never thought about even the correlation between the preparation and the patience that it takes to prepare for performing in a sport.
Yeah.
As well as performing and having success in business and that entrepreneurship. What a great analogy. I love that. I love that.
Of course. It's, you know, it's tricky because I think the harder part, to be honest, with entrepreneurship versus, I'll just say softball or sport in general, is typically on the sports side, you kind of know what you need to do, right? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, if I have a deficit, you know, if I'm a basketball player, I need to work on my 3-pointer. Like, I could just go into the gym and like do literally 3-point reps, and like, you're going to eventually get better at it. So I think the skill inherently is there, and that's awesome. But in entrepreneurship, the hard part is, what do I now apply this to? What do I apply this to? What are the reps that I need to take in the business, or like what are we, what do we need to get better at? And so I think that that's kind of where the challenge comes in. But I could talk all day about the the correlation between business and sport and teams and all that kind of stuff, because it's super complementary and related.
Very much.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great conversation for us to explore just a little bit more, because I have not had this conversation. I really, it's just in this short few minutes, I'm thinking of all the parallels here. And I'm even with the point you just brought up in terms of, not knowing necessarily, or not as easily knowing what the prescription is
Right.
for improvement.
Yes.
But it all comes down to data, like when you're in
Yes.
sports, when you're being recruited and you go to those big, I can't remember what they're called, but they're like recruiting days.
Yeah, like showcases and camps and stuff like that. Yeah.
Those high school students to a college, and they have them run all these drills together, and they time them, and they measure them against each other. And when they go into, well, even when they're in high school, even when they go to college, in both places, they let them know very specifically, like you said, this is the data. You're, running a mile at this pace. Yep. And if you want to hit this, you need to run it at this pace. And Absolutely. So it's like a, super easy to identify, but we make business complicated. So many businesses don't track the metrics, so they don't improve, and they don't know where to improve. So I really love this part of this conversation, honestly, of how, really just goes back to, you have to track the data in order to improve your performance, the same that you do in a team sport, or in any sport. It doesn't even have to be a team sport. In any sport, if you want to really play at that professional,
at the next level,
or that next level, that that you need to track the data and know exactly what your goal is. I'm not in any way a super knowledgeable about sports in any whatsoever, but I do know that it is it has a very scientific approach to everything.
For sure.
And it's not that difficult to apply these things to business. And I think we should.
Yep. Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
So when scaling a business as you have, what mindset shifts do you say are necessary to go from startup to more managing that growth as you've started to scale? What mindset shift is happening from that, early, we've just got maybe 3 to 5 studios, to hundreds or something like that?
For sure. I think the big thing, and what I've learned over the last few years specifically, is just you have to, it becomes about the who, not the how, right? It's who is going to help us get to this next level. And so, for example, I had built the first version of Pipeline, and we had a product. We actually had, I think we got up to about 50 studios with that product, which the front end of was an email. It was not even like a full dashboard. I have to go.
Data was being plugged in like with tokens in an email report. Is that what you're saying?
It was. Oh boy, it was this thing. We still actually have it, and a lot of studios still use it. It sounds a bit silly, but it makes sense, which is the daily performance report. So the idea was, look, if you don't even have time to log into a dashboard, we'll just send you a report to your inbox each morning that has like your 10 KPIs of like, hey, this is the snapshot of how your business is doing. If you only saw this today, it would at least give you, 1 to 3 kind of actionable things to do with your studio. So daily performance report, PDF, sent by email. And it's crazy, but that was, kind of where things got to, and that was a product in and of itself that people subscribed to, and that was, providing value for them. So but I knew that that's not the thing. That's not really the full vision of what we're trying to build here. And so it became, who can help us get to that next level, right? And that's when Mike had already worked with us in the past, and he came on as a partner. He's awesome as our CTO, and really the growth that we've had in the last 18 months has been, it can be directly related to bringing Mike onto the team, and what he's brought to our product from a development standpoint. So I think really as you get to these next levels, it becomes about who's going to step into the role that the next level needs. And as well as us, myself and John, co-founders, who do we need to become to get to this next level? What does that look like? So for me right now, of course, there's still a lot of involvement with the product. There's still a ton of involvement with the studios that we work with our clients. And I love all of that. It's really great. It's great to talk to them. It's great to understand, where things are helping them, and where, we can evolve things. So all of that is fantastic. And it's just a matter of, continuing to do those things, but also focusing on, growth, and who do we bring in, or what roles do we need to create, or what does the team look like to get to that next level. So that's kind of the way I'm thinking about it now. We're a small team, so the idea is that we keep growing and the business keeps growing, right? But in order to do that, we need to know who do we have to bring on next, right? And to know that, we have to know where we're going. So, we have team members. Yeah, we have team members on this bus, and we're kind of, just picking them up as we go, and making sure that we get to the right destination, and hoping that essentially everybody that we bring on board helps us get there, quicker, or all in one piece.
So, okay. So what about marketing as you have been growing this? I know that Pipeline Solutions has been kind of, I guess you could describe the motion as more mid-market, since you are targeting the holders or studio owners of multiple studios of the same brands. What has been I want to specifically hear about your content marketing and what role it's played in demand generation, and what challenges you faced along the way in terms of marketing in general, demand generation in general.
Right. Well, yeah, this is this is a short answer for us, because pretty much all of our growth has been referral or organic. So we have not done a ton of marketing. We do have a blog, which is got a lot of great content on it. It's up to date, which is great. So we have a bunch of articles on there. We get traffic to the blog for sure. We also have our own podcast, which we started up just this year, called Multi-Studio Mastery. So getting some guests on there, which has been really great to, have conversations around multi-studio operations and growth, with really, some brilliant people in the space. So that's just kind of getting ramped up. I think that will continue to be a great driver for us. It's just getting started. So we're just doing season 1 now. But those are probably the two things that I would, say we've done or are doing, we're committed to, and as well as just, personal LinkedIn posts, things like that. Just as a co-founder, it's always great to have our brand voice and, our vision come out through myself on platforms like that. So those would be the main things that we've done, but primarily a lot of our growth has been organic and through referrals. So that side of things is definitely something that we're looking to, do more of. And I think we're on the right track. We have those, couple different assets that we can pour, more attention into over the next little bit.
How are you, or have you encountered yet any challenges around creating the content or even the strategy for the content for those? Because I wonder if, since this is a little new, these
Yeah.
specific assets are a little new for you. So I'm thinking you may have recently started to realize some of the complexities or challenges to go
Oh,
down that lane because, with the podcast, for example, it is a beast. And
yeah,
until you automate it and systematize it,
for
it
sure.
can be very overwhelming.
Yeah.
So how have you specifically been saying, what, I'm gonna write a post on
Mm.
this? Or how have you even come up with an idea of what the content topics or pillars should be and what's going to resonate and what solves the problem of your audience and what your brand voice is? How have you
Yeah.
come up with any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a deep, deep rabbit hole.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So, I know how it is, and it is a lot because it's constant, right? So the thing about content is the volume is the hard part, and the consistency. I think the hard part is actually not just a content idea, but how you're going to convey it in a way that is unique and on brand um and different, right? So there's just, I think, a point where people have seen a lot of the same things, kind of over and over and over, and so trying to stand out in that kind of ocean that we're in now of content and trying to get people's attention is, probably one of the most difficult jobs you could have. I think that's kind of the main challenge, and yeah, we're going to be tackling that in the next little bit for sure. But I think where we'll start is just with, yeah, kind of the things we have going, and
Mhm.
talking to our studios that we work with, right? Because
Mhm.
they're the ones that are going to give more ideas than anything we could come up with in terms of, questions that we're answering on calls or things that are coming up in group conversations, things like that. So, in terms of generating ideas, I think there isn't necessarily like a shortage of that. It's just a matter of synthesizing that into content that is, worthy, right? Like, I think at the end of the day, too, you want to produce things that people get something from, not just to, drive. I know SEO is a thing. Don't get me wrong. I get it. I get that everything, has its place. But at the same time, we've all been on the other side of reading something where you think, oh, like I didn't. It like sparked an idea. Like, oh, I didn't think about that, or that's super interesting, or let me check out this or that. Like, that's what you want, right? Is not just another run of the mill kind of post or content that has a bunch of keywords, but instead something that really sparks an idea with somebody, or gives them an idea they can use in their business, or sparks a conversation, all those types of things. So I think for me, the challenge is how do we get there with what we're doing, and I think that's the big unlock for a lot of brands.
100%. Very well said. And I feel like you also mentioning just in 2024, just how much more difficult this problem has become with AI. And it has caused a situation where people really are starting to sound the same.
Yeah,
And you're
absolutely.
swimming in a sea of, like, how do you distinguish your brand? Not just from a content creation perspective, but just from your overall presentation.
Yep.
Whether that be your website, whether that be your headline, whether that be what type of lead magnet you have, and these types of things. How is it positioning your brand as the go-to expert or thought leader
Right.
for the space, in a way that is more that differentiates you from your competition, but also, as you
Yep.
said, adds value, constantly
Yes.
adds value and is an actionable thing so that your target audience, it doesn't only resonate with them that one time that they read
Mm-hmm.
something that helps them in that moment, but that they have a moment themselves where they say, you know what? I keep reading things from this
Yeah.
particular brand and it keeps giving me ideas. So
Right.
I'm going to keep looking for their content. And
Right.
I want to be a part of what they're creating
Hmm.
and not just getting the attention, but actually having it translate into dollars, into,
Yeah. You want it to translate into interest, right? Like
yes.
you want people to be interested in what you're saying. And I think that that's really there's a big gap there between, producing things that are out in the world and kind of fill that content bucket, and then things that are actually like interesting for,
Yep.
and it could be humorous, it could be educational, it could be informative. Like there's a number of different ways in which people find things interesting. But I think at the end of the day, that's really the differentiator is, you know, someone's got to find it interesting in some way, and creating that content is what the challenge is.
Have you ever encountered a time or had an experience where you were acutely aware of being either or and a woman or a person of color in this industry?
Yeah, of course. Of course. It's I think, look, things are obviously better, right? Like I wouldn't want to be me in any other time than
Mm,
now,
mm.
right? And that's the truth, right? Because things are progressively getting better and better and better, 100%. But even so, like oftentimes I'll find myself in rooms where I'm the only person that looks like me, and it's not to say that there's anything, anyone in those rooms is doing anything wrong by any stretch. That's not what I'm getting at all. But it takes time, right? Diversity takes time, and inclusion takes time, and it's getting better, and we're getting there. But of course, it's something that I've been experiencing though for a really long time. I played a sport that no one ever guessed that I played softball. The things that always came up were basketball, track, soccer, typically sports where you see people of color, women of color, art conservation, also not a super diverse field. So it's not something that's been foreign, and I'll just say that I've had uh, the real joy of working with amazing people across the board. I've had amazing teammates. I've had amazing colleagues. I've definitely been on the receiving side of really caring teammates and caring colleagues that see it as well, and are trying to do whatever they can do to make sure that they're being inclusive in any way that they can. So it's not to say that that's been an experience where it's where I've had like a particularly negative experience or anything like that. But of course, and there's been things for sure. It's one thing to be in a room where there aren't a lot of people that look like you. It's another thing to have conversations where things are implied or otherwise, and kind of be on the receiving end of those things. So those things happen. I'm not, I think anyone that's person of color or minority is experience those things. It's unfortunate that they still happen, but I think I come from a very optimistic and positive space, which is that for any prejudice or ignorance, really, to be honest, like oftentimes it's not malicious, it's just people just don't know or don't understand, that for any one of those there's 9 other great positive examples of people doing really great things in the space and in the world. So that's kind of what I lead into, because or else it's easy to get bogged down in the negativity of some of those things, but I like to stay on the positive end and attribute most things this day and age to just chalking it up to like ignorance or not really a malicious type of thing, subconscious or something of that nature versus outwardly anything that's directly derogatory, negative towards people of color, minorities. But I get it. It's a different time, and just trying to stay on the up.
Specifically for women,
Mm-hmm.
and in this industry of SaaS, specifically B2B SaaS and
For
tech,
sure.
where we are still there's a lot of women in this industry, but there's not a lot of women leading
Yeah.
in this industry. There's a lot of them that are really deeply supporting the work of others who are leading.
Mm-hmm.
What is your advice to the women who are leading, who are co-founding and founding these and creating this tech and these
Yeah.
platforms? Do you have any advice for them wanting to get into this space and knowing what they could potentially experience? Do you have
Mm-hmm.
any words of wisdom for them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's going to be challenges. There's going to be challenges across the board, no matter what. And there's going to be more, if you're a woman and a woman of color. Just inherently, the challenge there is statistically, we've seen it, with funding, with things like that,
Mm-hmm.
just less funding. And it's hard, right? It's essentially, it's hard not to take that as someone, not believing in you or your product or your service. So I think the real antidote to that is community and, finding other women, but also other people, men, like, there are
Right.
really great support systems just, in and around the tech space that, are really great at kind of creating a bit of a buoy, like a bit of a lift there, while you're navigating those waters. So 100% community is going to be the biggest thing. Going at it alone is not something that's that I think is really going to be conducive to success in this space. I think a lot of women, are very much, and women leaders, right? Go getter. I can do this. Let's go. Let's do this. And I get it because I'm the same. I think I could do a lot of things, but a lot of what actually started Pipeline with was the idea of, I've started things in the past by myself. And when it got hard, it was really, really hard. And now, at least, when we hit those road bumps or speed bumps in with Pipeline, I've got two other teammates and partners to have to go through
I'll
those
carry the
things
load.
with, right? Yeah, to
Oh.
share the load, to be supportive, because those things are going to happen. So I think really community is the biggest
Mm.
thing that's going to help there, and also asking for help. It's not, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, people ask for help all the time. You'd be surprised, the people leading the biggest companies in the world are asking for help all the time from their team. So I think those are, kind of the two biggest things that I would advise.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, where can people find you on social media, Tessa?
Yeah. Easiest is LinkedIn. I'm Tessa Thomas on LinkedIn. That's a great place to find me.
All right. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for this wonderful, inspiring, enlightening conversation. And thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
So
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Bye.